Today, we're diving into the story of a man who was caught between worlds, a celebrated poet whose loyalty, well, it was as complicated as the wild times he lived through. This is the paradox of Chou Qi-tzu.
Just let that sink in for a moment. I am already without life. I am just not yet buried. That's a quote from the man himself. It's an absolutely haunting line that just perfectly captures this feeling of being a ghost in your own life, a relic of a time that's already gone.
So that's the big question here, isn't it? How did a guy with his status, a man of such importance, come to feel so completely out of place, like an unburied soul? Let's get into it. Okay, so our story kicks off in 1949. The Chinese Civil War has just ended, and Chou Qi-tzu, who was a really well-respected writer and government official, finds himself among the millions fleeing to Taiwan with a nationalist government. And you gotta understand, for Zhu and so many others, this was way more than just moving house. It was like their entire world had just shattered. I mean, they left everything they'd ever known for this island that was only supposed to be temporary, right? A kind of holding area for a future that was anything but guaranteed. And in those early years, the 1950s, this feeling of being in limbo was really fueled by this one, single, all-consuming hope. It was a mission that basically defined that entire generation of exiles. And that mission was called Zongxing, which means restoration. This wasn't just some political slogan you'd see on a poster. No, this was a deeply personal, incredibly emotional dream of going home, of putting their broken world back together again. And this quote right here just shows you the sheer weight of that dream. Zhou references another famous poet, Liu Yo, who told his son to make sure to tell him at his grave when their country was finally reunified. But Zhou flips that idea completely on its head. He's saying, no, we have to do this. We have to see it in our own lifetime. The sense of personal responsibility was just immense. Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting. It's about how Chou Qi-tzu saw himself in all of this. To deal with this new life, he took on a very specific historical identity, but it came with this massive contradiction. He started to see himself as a yimin, which basically means a loyal remnant of a fallen dynasty. You know, picture someone who refuses to serve the new king after his own has been defeated. It's an identity that's all about loss and this fierce, unwavering loyalty to the past. But here's the paradox, the real head-scratcher. He saw himself as a Yinwan, a stubborn loyalist to a dynasty that was already lost. But at the exact same time, he saw all the people they left behind on the mainland as the other kind of yimin, lost subjects who were waiting for his government, the one that was still alive and kicking in Taiwan, to come and rescue them. And that's the question that just hangs over everything. How can you be a loyalist mourning a lost world when your government hasn't actually been destroyed? It just moved. How do you mourn it like it's gone, while also believing it's the true power that's about to make this big, glorious comeback? So as the years ticked by, that dream of a military Zongxing started to look less and less likely. And as it faded, Zhou's whole way of thinking began to change. His mission started to shift away from politics and towards something he felt was much, much deeper. And to get this shift, you have to understand this crucial idea he borrowed from a Ming Dynasty scholar. There's Wangguo, which is losing a state. You know, governments rise and fall. But then there's Wang Tenxia. That's losing the world. That's when civilization itself, the very values that hold it together, just collapses. For Zhou, the fight wasn't about taking back land anymore. It was about stopping that civilizational collapse. So what exactly was this world he was trying to protect? Well, it was a set of ideals. It was about defending things like free expression, democratic principles, and the cultural heritage that he was convinced the communists were trying to erase. His new job, as he saw it, was to be a guardian of the nation's conscience. And this wasn't just some abstract philosophical idea, okay? Zhu actually put this into practice, and it was often pretty risky. He started holding his own government accountable to these same ideals. See, back in Taiwan, the government was pushing a very specific kind of art, this state-sponsored anti-communist literature. It was all designed to serve a very clear political goal. And Zhou just wasn't having it. He publicly called it out. For him, art had to be free, and forcing it to serve a political agenda, even an agenda he agreed with, was a betrayal of that world he was trying to protect. He basically said, look, call it propaganda, but don't you dare call it art. And then came the real test. In 1960, a critic named Lei Zhen was arrested under martial law. His crime? Trying to start a democratic opposition party. I mean, this was a direct challenge to the very freedoms the nationalists claimed to represent. And Zhou's response was wow, just fearless. He wrote a poem to a high-ranking official, which was a pretty clear jab at the arrest. This line says it all. A truly great era, a government that's really confident, doesn't need to persecute its critics. He was applying his principles of freedom not just to his enemies, but to his own side. So when you put it all together, what do you get? What's the final picture of Chou Qi-tzu's legacy? You get a man who was defined by a loyalty that went way beyond simple politics. In the end, that deep sense of loss he felt wasn't just for a country or a piece of land. It was for an ideal. His real loyalty was to the world of culture, of freedom, of integrity that he felt was being destroyed on both sides of the strait. And this is the key takeaway. A political loyalist, they follow their government right or wrong. But Chou Qi-tzu, he was a cultural loyalist. He believed his highest duty was to hold his own government's feet to the fire to make sure it lived up to the very ideals it was supposed to be defending. That was his true north. And that's really what his story leaves us with. It's a question for all of us, right? In a world where things are always changing, where borders shift and governments change, what does it really mean to be loyal? Is it to a flag? Or is it to be ideas that flag is supposed to stand for? What's the world that you're trying to save?